Welcome to my channel, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Let's dive in.
The day I stepped into my childhood home again, a wave of emotions hit me like a freight train. Every corner held a memory. My mother's favorite armchair still by the window, the creaky wooden steps that I used to sneak down as a kid, the faint scent of the lavender she always kept in a bowl near the door. She had lived here until the very end, and now the house was mine. It wasn't just a piece of property. It was history, love, and family. I had no intention of selling it. This house was where I planned to spend my years. Fixing it up, maybe planting a garden like she always wanted. It was supposed to be my peaceful retreat from the noise of the world. But peace, as I would soon find out, was the last thing this neighborhood would offer. 3 days. That's all the time I had before they showed up. A trio of smiling women, dressed as if they were auditioning for a reality show about suburban superiority, arrived on my porch with a gift basket filled with cheap chocolates and a folder of paperwork. "Welcome to the neighborhood," one of them chirped, her voice sugary sweet, but her eyes scanning me like a debt collector sizing up a mark. They introduced themselves as part of the Homeowners Association, here to help me get settled. It didn't take long for them to reveal their real purpose. "We just need you to sign these HOA agreements," one of them said, sliding the papers toward me as if I had no choice in the matter. I frowned. I knew the neighborhood had an HOA, but I also knew something they were hoping I didn't. Membership was entirely optional. I flipped through the documents, spotting outrageous clauses about home inspections, decoration restrictions, and absurd fines for things like improperly placed garden ornaments. "I appreciate the welcome," I said, handing the folder back, "but I won't be joining the HOA." Their smiles froze, and for a moment they just stared at me. "Oh," one of them finally said, her tone shifting from friendly to firm. "It's not really optional. You live here now, so you have to sign." I shook my head. "No, I don't." And with that, I closed the door, thinking that would be the end of it. It was only the beginning. A week later, I started getting letters. The first was a simple reminder about the HOA contract. Then came the fines. At first, they almost seemed like a joke. $200 for lawn neglect, because a few autumn leaves had fallen on my yard. $500 for having an unapproved mailbox, even though it had been there since the house was built. I ignored them, assuming they'd realize their mistake soon enough. But they didn't stop. The fines increased in absurdity and amount. My grass was too long, then too short, then the wrong shade of green. My porch light was too bright. My car was parked at a non-optimal angle. I wasn't even in their HOA, yet they acted as if they owned my property. One afternoon, I found a notice taped to my door stating that I owed them over $5,000 in fines. When I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash, another one arrived the next day, then another within a month. The total had climbed to over $30,000. Frustrated, I went to talk to some of my neighbors, hoping to get some insight. I expected sympathy, maybe some shared outrage. Instead, I found resignation. "Just pay them," one man muttered, glancing around as if someone might be listening. "They'll make your life hell if you don't." Another neighbor, an elderly woman who had lived there for decades, sighed and said, "They do this to everyone who doesn't fall in line. It's easier to just give them what they want." That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't just an overzealous HOA. This was a racket, an organized shakedown of homeowners under the guise of community regulations. But I wasn't about to roll over and let them rob me. It escalated from harassment to outright criminal activity. When I came home one evening and found my front door ajar, my heart pounded as I stepped inside, bracing for the worst. And then I saw them. 3 of the same HOA board members who had first greeted me with that fake hospitality, standing in my living room, clipboards in hand, casually going through my belongings. My breath caught in my throat, rage and disbelief crashing over me. "What the hell are you doing?" I bellowed. They barely even flinched. One of them, the same woman who had handed me the contract, looked up with a patronizing smile. "We're conducting an inspection," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Since you haven't paid your fines, we're assessing the value of your possessions to collect what we're owed. My fists clenched so hard, I could feel my nails digging into my palms. Get out, I growled. They didn't move. That's when I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, making sure they heard every word as I reported a break-in in progress. Even as the cops arrived, they acted as if they had done nothing wrong. We have a right to be here, one of them insisted, arms crossed defiantly as an officer cuffed her. He owes the HOA money. We're just collecting. But the law didn't agree. They were arrested on the spot for breaking and entering, as well as attempted theft. As they were hauled away, one of them spat, "You'll regret this." But as I stood on my porch, watching them disappear into the back of a squad car, I knew the only thing I regretted was not calling the cops sooner. With the break-in documented and arrests made, I knew it was time to take this fight to the next level. I hired a lawyer, an old-school, no-nonsense guy who had been taking down corrupt HOAs for decades. "They're bluffing," he said after reviewing the fines. "They have no legal claim to your property. But we're going to make sure they never try this again." We took them to court not just for the bogus fines, but for harassment, fraud, and illegal trespassing. When the case at the courtroom, their entire scheme unraveled. It turned out I wasn't their only victim. Far from it. Dozens of homeowners have been bullied, threatened, and fined for years, all under the false authority of a mandatory HOA that wasn't mandatory at all. The judge didn't just throw out the fines. He ruled that the HOA had been operating outside the law for years. The board members who had broken into my home were convicted, and the rest of the HOA crumbled under the weight of legal fees and lawsuits from other homeowners who had finally found the courage to fight back. The HOA was dissolved, their office shut down, their ridiculous rules erased from existence. For the first time in years, the neighborhood was free. As for me, I stayed long enough to see it all fall apart, to watch those who had terrorized homeowners finally get what they deserved. But in the end, I realized that the memories of my childhood home had been tainted. The house no longer felt like the safe, warm place it had once been. So I sold it, packed my bags, and moved on, carrying one final lesson with me. Never let anyone take what's rightfully yours, and when faced with corruption, stand your ground. Because bullies, no matter how powerful they seem, always fall in the end. The courtroom battle was just the beginning. The moment the judge ruled in my favor and threw out the bogus fines, I knew I had struck a nerve. But what I didn't expect was the ripple effect that followed. News of the case spread like wildfire through the neighborhood, and suddenly, people who'd been too afraid to speak up started coming forward with their own horror stories. Elderly residents who had been bullied into paying thousands for violations they never committed. Families forced to repaint their homes multiple times just to meet the ever-changing aesthetic standards. Single mothers fined for leaving their trash cans out for an hour too long. All of them had suffered in silence, too scared to fight back. But now, with the HOA's corruption exposed, they finally had a voice. Homeowners who've been quietly accepting the abuse for years started filing complaints of their own, and the once feared HOA board found itself drowning in lawsuits and investigations. It was no longer just my fight. It was a community uprising. The very people who had been controlled and intimidated were now standing together, demanding justice. And the HOA had no idea how to handle it. The downfall of the HOA wasn't just a legal victory. It was a financial disaster for them. When their fraudulent practices were exposed in court, their funds were frozen, their legal team abandoned them, and their so-called power evaporated overnight. Board members started resigning left and right, hoping to escape the inevitable reckoning. The remaining members scrambled to hold emergency meetings, trying to salvage what little authority they had left, but it was too late. The damage was done. Homeowners started questioning everything. Why were they paying such high dues for services that never seemed to materialize? Where had all that money gone? A deeper investigation revealed that a chunk of the HOA's funds had mysteriously disappeared into the personal accounts of a few select board members. Embezzlement, fraud, and financial misconduct charges were soon added to their growing list of crimes. With lawsuits piling up and their funds drained, the HOA was left with no choice. They declared bankruptcy, shutting down their entire operation in a last-ditch effort to avoid further liability. It was the ultimate poetic justice. The same organization that had spent years squeezing money out of innocent homeowners was now financially ruined, its leaders facing real consequences for their actions. The collapse of the HOA should have meant the end of the nightmare, but the impact of their corruption lingered. Even after their dissolution, homeowners were left dealing with the wreckage. Some were still fighting to reclaim the money they had been forced to pay over the years. Others were stuck with unnecessary home renovations done just to comply with HOA rules that no longer existed. The damage wasn't just financial, it was emotional. People had spent years living in fear, walking on eggshells in their own homes, afraid of ridiculous fines or threats of foreclosure. It wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about healing a community that had been manipulated and controlled for far too long. With the HOA gone, homeowners finally had the freedom to make their own decisions about their properties without some self-important committee breathing down their necks. The victory was undeniable, but the scars remained. It was a lesson that would stick with them for a lifetime, one that reminded them never to give blind power to an organization that had no real accountability. As I walked through the neighborhood in those final weeks before selling my home, I could feel the shift. The fear was gone. People were finally painting their houses the colors they actually wanted, putting up decorations they had been previously fined for, and reclaiming their properties in ways they never thought possible. A neighbor who had been forced to take down a wooden fence because it wasn't in harmony with the community aesthetic was now rebuilding it with a grin on his face. The elderly woman who had been fined for planting flowers outside the designated season was now turning her entire front yard into a vibrant, blooming paradise. The community wasn't just recovering. It was thriving in ways the HOA had spent years trying to suppress. It was proof that people didn't need an oppressive organization to create a beautiful neighborhood. They needed freedom, respect, and the ability to make their own choices without fear of punishment. Watching it all unfold was bittersweet. I had fought so hard to save my home, to stand my ground. But now that the battle was over, I realized something I hadn't admitted to myself before. I didn't belong there anymore. Selling the house wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. The memories of my childhood were precious, but they had been tainted by the battle I had to fight just to exist there. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if another corrupt HOA would try to rise from the ashes. I wanted a fresh start, somewhere I could truly call home without the ghosts of this war lingering in every corner. So I listed the house, and to my surprise, it sold almost immediately. The buyers had heard about the downfall of the HOA and saw the neighborhood for what it truly was, a place of potential, now free from the chains that had held it down for so long. As I packed my bags and prepared to leave, I felt a strange mix of relief and nostalgia. I had won, but in doing so, I had outgrown the place that once meant everything to me. Driving away that final time, I couldn't help but reflect on the lessons this experience had taught me. Power without accountability will always lead to corruption. Fear only thrives when people refuse to fight back. And most importantly, your home is not just four walls and a roof. It's your sanctuary, your safe space, and no one has the right to dictate how you live in it. The battle I fought wasn't just for me. It was for every homeowner who had ever been bullied into submission, for every family that had been forced to bend the will of an unchecked HOA. And if there's one piece of advice I give anyone dealing with a similar situation, it's this: know your rights. Do your research. Never let an organization scare you into thinking you have no options. The law is on your side more often than you think, and bullies, no matter how powerful they seem, will always crumble when you stand your ground. Moving to a new home, away from all the chaos, felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life. There were no arbitrary rules about the height of my grass, no threats of fines for leaving my trash can out an extra hour, no fear of someone invading my space under guise of community regulations. It was real freedom, and I had earned it. And as I settled into my new house, far from the reach of any HOA, I made a promise to myself. I would never again let anyone tell me how to live in my own home, because at the end of the day, a house is just a structure, but the feeling of truly owning your life, that's priceless.